Hi, so this video is the most important thing that a country can have is the ability to create the ability for people to own their own homes. And it's a good gauge for if the economy is in a healthy condition, and also a gauge to determine if the ultra wealthy are up to no good or not. So, for example, if the ultra wealthy start getting up there and yapping about how it's best for everybody to rent because of their economy, their economics, then you should read into it, and you should assume that they said that because they're benefiting from it and you're not, and they don't care about you. And prepare to, when you read into it, that that's what you will find. That's what Warren Buffett was saying, that economically it's better to rent, and he probably said it because, not because he's a genius investor, but because he and his friends depend on renting their houses, renting to people, and if the people can't buy houses, they can see that it'll end up hurting them. And so investing is one thing. Like, if you're going to invest in big companies and then get your return from the company. But investing in like a bunch of apartments to then rent out to people is not a good way to invest. If you're going to make money from renting things, you should be making money like renting a house because you're on vacation, or you're spending a few years out of the country, or like you're saving the house for your children or something. But there should be a law passed that one person can't own more than 3 houses, no matter what, or 3 condos, so that renting condos out to somebody else isn't a thing. That you're basically, everybody is encouraged to own their own place. And so, and some of the people I'm thinking right now who make their money off of renting is Robert Kowalski. I saw some really quick clip of him and saying something what do you think about all the bankruptcies? And he's like, talk to my fucking lawyer. But he said that he made his money. I guess he's making all his money now. He has 6,000 rental units that he rents out. That's how he makes his money. So number one, if you have 6,000 rental apartments that you're renting out, you're making a ton of money, and you're too rich just from that. But also, if you think about it, if like that's a whole apartment, imagine if each one had a family in it. So, and a family of 5, that's like 35,000. That's like an entire city. So you're basically own an entire city. You're like Crassus from ancient Rome, who started the fire or after the fire went up and bought up all the land from the people who lost it, and then turned into a slumlord. And then you become the kind of like the impediment between people, buying their own places, because you're the one owning it. And so now you're just like hanging around doing nothing, just collecting money on that. But so let me explain like all the negative things that happen when people have to rent, and then all the positive things that can happen if people have homes. So number one, if people have to rent, it's because they don't have the money to buy their home. And that would, no matter, and even if they're working all the time. And so that means that that there's too much wealth discrepancy, like the pay gap is too much. If you're ever going to start like a colony, like the ancient Greeks start a colony somewhere, or the English come out here and start a colony, the idea is that the people go out there and become colonists, and everybody gets a house. You all divvy up the land, and you get the house, and it's all even. The idea isn't you're going to go out there and with one guy, and then he gets to own the entire city, and everybody has to rent out of him, because then that'll give him the power to just kick people out. He's like a king. And so if you ever have a situation where there's a guy and he has like 6,000 rental units, that represents like a devolution in the society. Like, because you would imagine that, that when it's in its healthy state or the beginning state, people own their homes. But now people lose their homes and now they're just renting. Like when you're going out, you know, in the Wild West and people homestead and they set their stake in the ground for their home, you know, it's so that they have a home. And so the idea is that, you know, you have your own, you know, sovereignty. And your sovereignty is, well, number one, expressed with your body, but an extension of your body would be your home. And so if you don't have a home, the negative things that can happen is that you have no opportunity to ever be creative or express your own creativity in your living space, and you don't even have a private living space because you can't do anything with it. So it's like you're, you know, you're literally in somebody else's house, and then because you can't express your artistic, you know, personality, then you have no way of finding what your personality is, and that makes it even more difficult to go out in the world and have, you know, your own individual opinions and about things, and you know, personality, and you know, be able to grow in the world. You'll get stuck like a child, you know, in those little swaddling things, and you'll never grow up. You'll be like a man child your whole life. And then and a lot of that would stem from the fact that you weren't allowed to decorate your house. You know, it's like North Korea with Kim Jong-un saying you can only choose between two different hairstyles, and oh, aren't you so free because you get to choose between the two hairstyles. You know, you can't, and then you can't choose what clothing you wear outside, and you just become an automaton. In ancient Greece, when Aristotle was talking about like the different classes, you know, he was talking about slaves, and Plato was talking about slaves. You know, they're like slaves weren't seen even as people. You couldn't trust them with anything. You know, but it was like common knowledge. Like, of course, if you let the slave loose in your house, he's going to steal as much as he can, because it's like an us versus them thing. And I went down to like Chile, and when you have huge wealth discrepancy like in Chile, nobody trusts each other. None of the different classes trust each other. When you buy something in a store, you have to have one person go behind the counter to find it, and then you have to go, and that person has to give it to another person, who then puts it in a file, and then you have to stand in another line to actually pay for it. So there's 3 different steps you have to go through because people were stealing from each other all the time. And even on small scale, like my wife's brother had a small scale jewelry fabric factory that was only like as big as like a room. It was just like a 1-room jewelry factory, but his workers would steal from him all the time, you know. And then rich people, they would like steal from their workers by not paying them, and it just causes strife when there's wealth discrepancy, and the type of wealth discrepancy when people can't buy their houses. If you can't buy a house, then maybe they should set up a system where it's just a bunch of little tiny houses, and then you could buy a tiny little munchkin house. And if you can't even like get a bank deal, a bank loan, and have your job, your basic job, pay off your bank loan for even a 1-room tiny little house, then you know there's something wrong with the economy. And like you need to fix it basically by taxing the wealthy, increasing minimum wage, making it so that there's like extremely low interest rate on houses from the banks. In ancient Rome, they understood, I don't remember what part, I think what part of the history, but they had like a 4% tax when you, interest rate when you would buy land. So that's the kind of interest rate that they need to have, like not an interest rate that's modeled off of making money for somebody, but an interest rate that's main sole purpose is to allow people to have houses. And you would think that if somebody lived in just an apartment and you work all day long, that you would at least be able to pay for an apartment and have it as yours, in your name, as your home that you own. And and if you can't do that, then there's something wrong with the economy. And then also, if you allow people to just own a bunch of houses, then you can have all of these like empty houses. And like, I guess there's a problem with that going on in New York, where all of these billionaires from other countries just basically buy huge apartments and then don't ever live in them because they buy them as a investment because the American economy is more stable than the countries that they're from, and they're trying to hide and launder money, and so they do it by buying these apartments and then just not living in them. And so then there's all these people living in a city that can't inhabit those apartments because they're overpriced and occupied by some like phantom investor who's not even there. It's kind of like, to draw analogies, it's kind of like in the waning days of the French kingdom. Louis the 14th brought all of the different lords back to Versailles so that he could control them and centralize the power, but they get to still own the land of the places where they came from. So that you have all of these absentee landlords for all of these and like politicians who are supposed to represent their districts, who don't know anything about where they come from, yet they have all of these decisions that they have to make concerning where they were, but they're not even at, so they don't know anything about it, and they're receiving all the extra money from that land when the people who live around the area should be receiving the money. And so all the money gets centralized around Versailles. And so then they have the money to create that 10,000 room Versailles with the Hall of Mirrors and the Marie Antoinette's own village that she created, fantasy village with all of the houses around the lakes and the 10,000 acres or whatever it is of land with the perfectly manicured grass that goes for as far as the eye can see, and just a bunch of people dressing up and putting powder on their faces and having parties every day because they don't know what to do with their money and they have too much money, and of course they have the French Revolution, and like Warren Buffett, like these investors, they have so much money to invest they don't even know where to invest it, and so they just it just turns into these cesspits of money, just making them even richer. And that's how you bleed people dry and get them kicked out of their apartments. I think that's a really good gauge. And also all of the different empty houses that you see, because other people just have just places where they're not at, and then it invites people to come here and then move into your house, like the Venezuelan kids coming up here and saying, oh, all you have to do is move into the house and then it's yours. And so then it causes crime because people know that there's houses that aren't inhabited. And also, how does it make sense that one person could live in a huge mansion that's way too big that they would ever need? They're just trying to invest in artwork with their mansion and have a bunch of cars. And then there's all these people who support them who don't even own the places that they live, and they have no power. And so it's gross. It's hideous. It's grotesque. And it's not representative of democracy or a free country. This is supposed to be land of the free, home of the brave. You can't be free and brave if you're shaking in your boots, wondering when you're going to get kicked out of your house. I was living with my mom 10 years ago, whatever, for a couple months. And then she kicked me out. And I moved in with my friend in Lafayette. And he was renting this 2-bedroom A-frame house, tiny little house that so I moved into his spare room, this tiny little spare room. And I was with him for 5 or 6 months. But then the house was owned by some person who knows how many houses they owned, and then they had their property management company manage it, right? So the rich person could just hire some property management company, and now it's a property management industry. So it's an industry that shouldn't even exist in the first place, which is highly inefficient for the streamlining of an economy. Because you wouldn't have to have all those property management companies if people could just own their houses. But then the property management company evicted my friend for no reason. They just sent him a letter once and said, hey, you have to leave by the end of the month. And they didn't give a reason. And he had paid his rent on time the entire time he lived there. And so there was no problem. They just wanted to kick him out for who knows what reason. Like maybe the landlord wanted to put up a bunch of his like friends for free, you know? Because so like imagine like Robert Kowalski, right? And all of a sudden he gets in a bad mood and he's like, oh, you know what? I have a bunch of like kids I want to kick out of my house and move into some of my houses I rent. So he just evicts a bunch of people, throws them into the house. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I think I want to store a bunch of stolen goods in one of these places. He can kick a bunch of people out and just throw them in there. Hey, what if he wants to make a bunch of grow rooms? Kick a bunch of people out, do the grow rooms in there, or kick a bunch of people out in order to rent to people who he doesn't like, certain types of people who he doesn't like. Like it gives him all kinds of power that people shouldn't have over other people, like Donald Trump. They make their money renting apartments to people, but then he only rents to white people. So what if like somebody had like 6,000 different rental units and they decided that they only wanted to rent to one certain type of person? You know, well, there's laws in place, I guess, for that, but what if they, you know, the laws get lax because you have somebody like Trump in who gets rid of the regulatory agencies and or they figure out ways to, you know, like Donald Trump got away with only renting to rich white people. So then they can control who to rent to, and then they control, you know, they have like all these different levers to control other people and like push them around and, you know, like they're slaves. Like a slave, one definition of a slave is you can't choose what to do or where you live. Well, then Robert Kowalski and these guys get to just push these people around and have them live in wherever they want them to live. What if all these rich people knew each other and had like thousands and thousands of rental units, and then they got together, and they could just for fun they could evict all the like immigrants from here, and then have them and only rent them over in this one place off in the corner. You could create like ghettos, like in the Middle Ages with the Jews, just quarantine people off over there, and then put the people who you like over here, and then that's going to poison the personality of the rich people, because then they're just going to develop these like super manipulative, like cold personalities where they're just like, then they have the worker bees, and they're like, you do that, you go here, you get there, hey, you clean my car, you do that, and then they just bossing people around, and then they get into the habit of bossing their own kids around, and then until their kids don't like it, and their kids are like, yo, don't boss me, and they're like, oh no, but I boss you. So then they get estranged, and then they never speak to each other again. And so then they have kids, but they don't actually have kids because they don't talk to them because they were treating them like they're workers. And it just warps people's personalities. It warps the rich people into becoming bullies. And then it warps the poor people into becoming like meek, scared, uncreative, you know, people who can't allow their brains to develop because they can't think, you know, creatively. Because there's all sorts of different ways, you know, to express yourself, and it would encourage people to express themselves video on YouTube, because they could do it in their house, you know, and then they wouldn't be ashamed of living in a tiny little boring house, or they could actually show their personality and their artistic nature through their house, you know. Like, for example, I currently own my condo right now. I'm currently, you know, losing money quick. I have a $70,000 HELOC loan, and hopefully I can take out more money as much as I can, because nobody will hire me. But or donate to my site, whatever. That's another thing. But yeah, because the IRS keeps charging me, double charging me. They want me to pay $3,000 for 2022 when I did pay. But yeah, so like people need to be secure. See, look at my apartment. This is what I did with my apartment. And it's just an apartment, mind you. It's not a big ass house, right? So I'm like, look at my apartment. Look at how I set up with the ferrets and the cages and all of the different lights and then I can philosophize. I did like an 1.5-hour video talking about my apartment, philosophizing about my philosophy of organizing. You know, putting the two chairs facing each other, and you know, I get to be an artist with my own life and my house, right? But people, if you don't own your house, you don't get to be an artist. So imagine if you're hanging out with some like rich ass person and they're like, yeah, I'm really cool, man. Like, I'm really interesting, cool person. Look how artistic I am. You know, I'm really down to earth. You know, like you think I'm a rich person, but no, I'm like a real person because look, I can make art. But it's like, yeah, but like, and it's like the same person who like is against, you know, taxing the wealthy or rents a bunch of places. It's like, I would be embarrassed bragging about being an artist if my whole existence depends on people not being able to be artists themselves. Because then you can't then the only reason that you're an artist isn't from your artistry or your intelligence or creativity. It's from your wealth, your ability to do it, like being born in the right family or you know, ripping people off to be in the position you are. So you know, if I was a legislator, I would reduce those interest rates big time, and have like you know, like a government bank that would loan the money out for 4% to people so that they could own their apartment, you know. And then once you own an apartment, then you can raise kids. You don't have to move your kids around. Like, imagine kids who have to move around. They end up with no friends, right? Like, kids don't like to move around. They have their friends, and then like, why do I have to move? I can't develop a friendship with Joey and Susie. So then they move on. Then they have to move again because they get evicted or their landlord raises the rent on them. So then they have to uproot, and then the kid grows up and they're like, I don't have any friends. I mean, there's a bunch of poor ass people who I knew, but I don't think they had friends any either because they just had to move around. So then the only people who get to have friends from when they're younger, from consistently, are the super rich people. So it just causes a whole cat. It's like modern day slavery when people can't own houses, and so you know, and if you can't, and see, this is why there's so much homelessness. Like, people would much rather live in their very own tent than in somebody else's apartment. Because at least when you're in your very own tent, you can live where you want. People can't push you around. You can live in the tent city, or you could pack up your tent and move to another place, or you can live in a car. Because now your car, you can decorate your car how you want, and so that's your sovereignty in your car. And you can paint the car how you want, or whatever. And then you get to drive the car where you want. That's what people want, is freedom. You know, like an animal. Animals want to go where they want. You know, so, you know, the whole like homelessness epidemic may not all be because people can't afford apartments. It's because they don't want to be somebody's slave. You know, so all these rich people. So then like Donald Trump is like, we need to make a law. I think I heard him say something like that, to force people to get these drug addicts off the streets and to force them into houses, right? So that you can then charge them way too much rent to make the rich landlord rich, and then you can kick them out if you want to, or just keep jacking up the price. So, and also, you know, if you have like your own small little apartment to yourself, the property taxes aren't that much. You also could make a deal, also make a law that says the property taxes are super low, so that if you're unemployed for long periods of time, you don't get raped up the ass with taxes, you know? Like, if you want taxes to pay for the roads and stuff, tax the wealthy. Don't tax poor people into where they can't even have a house anymore. And so that, you know, and also it's not so bad to be unemployed if you have a house, especially if you own your house. Because then you're like living in heaven. Like, oh, really? I don't have to work? And I have my own house? Hell yeah. And so then, you know, these asshole rich people are like, oh, but then if you let the people do UBI or whatever, then they'll just lay on their asses and not do anything, and then they'll get up to no good. Well, that's you not trusting them, thinking that you're way better than them and that people need to be policed. But you're not policed, you're policing other people, right? So when you give people too much power, they like get carried away with it. You know, like Elon Musk. You know, he just needs to keep buying more and more businesses and making more and more money. You know, like there is some Indian dude who, Chajiwaga or whatever. I saw some dude do a video about him. He was one of the Facebook guys. So he was one of the early Facebook guys, right? Made a bunch of money as a computer programmer. And then made all the money, so then he decided to get into venture capital and then make even more money, turn into a billionaire. And then he wanted to get access to the president. And he's complaining, and he's saying that Trump is a better president than Biden because it's easier to talk to Trump and to direct Trump to do things and get somebody on the phone if you want to talk to him about policy with Trump than Biden, because he paid all the money. So now he's like, yo, yeah. So it's totally cool that, number one, you become a billionaire, and when you're super rich, that you'll never have to work again. But that's not enough. So it's super cool to become a billionaire, and after that, it's super cool to become even so much of a billionaire that you can just donate hundreds of millions of dollars to the candidate you want, so that it's super duper cool to be able to just direct the policy to make yourself even richer. So you basically, from the beginning, the little computer nerd at the beginning didn't have a foundation of like common sense or like decency or civic, rights and history and everything, and the concept of a healthy society, that he straight up thinks that there should be billionaires who should become even more billionaires who could then direct the government. So they think there shouldn't be democracy. So that's why Peter Thiel is like, oh yeah, like this democracy thing, like whatever that is, like we really should take it over. Because if they get a little bit and they see that they have actual control over the government, they just want more. They just want more and more money, because their like souls are empty. And so we need to pass laws to protect the people. And notice I didn't say like, we need to like tax the wealthy to tax. No, it's we need to give people houses. And if the way to get the people the houses is by taking money from the wealthy, then yes, we need to allow the people to have the houses. This battery's about to die, yeah, we need to do whatever we can do to own houses. And it's also a good gauge, like if more and more people are not losing houses, then, and also if you don't have a house, how can you own anything? And if you can't own anything, how can you buy anything? If you can't buy anything, how can you stimulate the economy, right? Nobody's going to want to buy anything ever, because they can't put it anywhere, because they could get kicked out of their tiny little apartment whenever. And so then there goes the economy. There's no owning anything for anybody, no buying, and then the rich people can't make money. So, the number one sign of a good healthy economy is if people own their apartments. And like I've been falling deeper and deeper into debt over the last couple of years, but I'm still happy because at least I own my apartment. And there's nobody who can just suddenly kick me out just because for no reason either, and then start doing stuff for no reason. So then we're teaching people the habit of just, completely ruining somebody's life or upending things for no reason. So it's like just inching closer and closer and closer to like Russia, totalitarian dictatorship and oligarchy with huge wealth discrepancy, which then never are stable. And then, and America needs to be the first person the first country to be secure like that, and to have people own their own houses, because one country has to be like that. Because then where are all the other people from the third world countries gonna like stabilize their countries and store their wealth? All right, where you're all, well, mainly because you need an example country to show everybody else the right way to do it. So you know the difference between a healthy society and an unhealthy society, and why the healthy society is healthy. So I don't know what all like the interest rates or whatever it is, but like I think that's a really good like hobby to get into, or field, is knowing all of that data, and then to just spread it out and have suggestions on how to get people to own their own houses, even if it's tiny little house, And then if you want to have so much wealth discrepancy, you have some dude live in a huge mansion and a bunch of people in tiny little houses. At least the people own them, but you could still, in my opinion, you could then use that as a springboard to say, hey, you know what? Maybe these people should have larger houses, and those people have smaller houses, because you can actually visually see the difference. Yeah, it just causes so much like crime and strife and ruined childhoods and all of that from having to move around because you don't have your house, and then it causes people to go nuts and bullies, and non-democratic when they can just, kick people out, and and you can't be artistic and all that. So I just wanted to get that out there. I'm on the side of the people who think that we should really do whatever we can do for people to be able to own their own houses. Yeah. Talk to you tomorrow. I'm doing a lot of more videos now because I'm like not smoking weed anymore.